When you asked that question, my mind went immediately to where Jesus washes the disciples' feet. And so basically, Peter's like, no, I don't want you to wash my feet. And Jesus is like, I'm going to do it. And then after he's all done with that, he looks at his disciples and he says, you know what, you should serve each other the same exact way. And so what I found fascinating was later on in the chapter, he basically answers the other question, because he says, how is the world going to know that you're my disciple? It's the love that you have for one another. So it's just like this beautiful picture of community.
Well, Miss Martha asked, and you can't say no to her. It's the first reason that you serve. No, but we serve because we were made to glorify God and to be thankful for the gifts that He gave us. And we do that by coming here and we serve it by serving, and to show that we're thankful for all that He's done for us.
I guess I would say because saved people serve people, and because blessed people want to bless other people. And we're both of those. And it's a good time.
I think it's Galatians 5:13, where the Apostle Paul says, through love, serve one another. So what better way to serve than by serving at grace? In the New Testament, that phrase, one another, occurs over 100 times. So that says to me, life is just better connected.
I think someone should serve at Grace because it's like a community aspect, and once you get involved, you have so many people supporting you, and it just feels good to serve and feels good to give, because it's so much support. The church family aspect is a real thing people can get from it, and I know from my experience getting that help was really good, and having people around you and just being in a community that cares for each other.
So I think we should all be connected at Grace because we need people in our lives. I don't think we can do life alone, and I don't think we should do life alone. So having good relationships at Grace allows us to be held accountable, grow spiritually, and just develop great lifelong friendships. It's important to know that when we serve, we're not really doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the people that we're serving. So whether it's working at Kid Zone or working in the parking lot, we're going to be impacting somebody.
So we're in our series, Huddle Up, and when I think of getting in a huddle, sometimes I think, if you're thinking football and you're in the hurry-up offense, you're doing well, right? And so maybe you're thinking huddle up is hey, we got to do better. But first I want to pause, because we're going to be talking about the two things today, is life is better connected and save people, serve people. There are so many of you that are involved in groups. And so I want to encourage you in that. We'll talk about that. We can definitely grow in that, but you're doing great. And then when you talk about save people, serve people, I want you to know I am so thankful all summer long, whether it be the Family Fun Day or kicking off the summer with Micro Kickers. You guys serve amazingly. And so I want to say thank you for that first and foremost. Now, can we grow? Can we get better? Of course we can. But rather than thinking of hey, this huddle up is a family talk, we gotta do better, guys. I want us to think of this not as something we should do, because we are doing it, but I want us to think about this through the lens of why we actually do it. I'm sure at some point in your life you've been over to somebody's house, maybe it was before you were married, and you're why? You get to know the family and they're why are they the way that they are? Why are they just maybe have a weird tradition, maybe something that doesn't make sense. And as you get to know them, you figure out why they do that. If you were to come to our house on February 18th, we have a little celebration. It might include Timbits or brownies or a big cookie, and there'd be candles in them, right, and all these things. And it's not because there's a birthday, though. There's no birthday involved in this, but it's something that our family celebrates because it's important to us. And as you get to know us, you'd understand why, because we've done it every year since 2016. We even gave it a name. We call it a Heartiversary. And it's a celebration of the day that our daughter had open heart surgery. So to us, this is a very important day because her heart was mended that day. at least the structural stuff in it. And so this is an important thing that if you were to come to our house, you might be like, why? There's no birthday. It's February 18th. Like, what's going on? And it's because it's important to us. So when we talk today about our values and what we here at Grace do, first, I commend you for what you're doing. But more importantly, I want us to remember why. What's the why behind why we're doing it? Or maybe you're here for the first time, or you're new around here, and hopefully you've experienced some of what we're going to be talking about. But now, more than just experiencing it, you're going to understand why, what motivates us. Why do we do what we do here at Grace? So before we begin, let's pray. God, as we think about our values, we want to value what you value. We want to, as we look to make more and better followers of Jesus, this isn't something that we make up, but we want to know and follow what Jesus did. And so, would you use your word now to impact my heart and to change my heart and to change my attitudes and to change the way that I live? And I pray that for each and every person in here as well, that you would use your word to convince us why we need to be connected or why or where we can serve. And so I just ask that you would do a work that's unmistakably you. In Jesus' name, amen. Communication and connection has exploded over the last 50 years even. But when you think about it, we go from the telegraph to the Pony Express to cell phones and from telephones to cell phones. And now we have all these social media outlets that you can connect with people, right? That you can communicate with people all the time. Yet, for all of these opportunities that we have, all the ways that you can be connected and get connected, we're one of the most disconnected societies. Did you know that in May of this year, the Surgeon General put out an advisory on the epidemic of loneliness? I heard these stats this week that 36% of Americans would say that they feel serious loneliness. In that 36%, there's 61% of young adults that feel that way, and 51% of moms with young kids. And no doubt that the pandemic drove that number up. The young adults would agree with that, and over 40% of them say that their loneliness increased since 2020. See, but it's not just young adults or moms with young kids. I also read that 58% of Americans say that they don't have someone in their life that knows them well. 58%. That means in this room, 1 out of 2 people. That means that at your work, 1 out of 2 people. It means at your schools, students, 1 out of 2 people. I find that to be extremely sad. That 1 out of 2 people feel like there isn't somebody that cares enough about them to know them well. This typically leads not just to feeling lonely, but that loneliness, a lot of people say it goes to anxiety and depression. That's what the Surgeon General says. There's a whole thing that you can read on it. But I don't think we just need to look to the Surgeon General. I think you might experience it yourself, or somebody that you know might experience it as well. But see, God made us for relationships. God doesn't want the loneliness. That's not how He created us. He didn't create us to be isolated and alone. He created us to be with others and to be connected with others. This is the first why that life is better connected. It's that God made us for relationships. See, right from the beginning in the book of Genesis, God says this: "Then the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone." And yes, I know this is where He's talking about marriage, right? But single person, don't think that the only way you are going to feel connected and not be lonely is by being married or having to have a spouse. Because I bet you talk to the people that are married in this room and other people, and you would find out that they might still be lonely. They might still experience that. See, the principle is that God created us for relationships. But don't fall into the trap that just get married and you won't be lonely. All throughout Scripture, we see that God talks about this. He made us for relationships with one another, and that life is better connected. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 4. It says, 2 are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and is not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And in Proverbs 27, it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Okay, God made us for relationships. He made us for friendships, that we need to be connected with other people. But notice these friendships that we just looked at, the connectedness is not one of simple passing by. Right? Passing by each other in the foyer, saying hi as you go to church, or at work, you have these conversations, and they're surface. They're not casual relationships, they're intentional relationships. They say that there are 4 different types of relationships that we can have. First, we can have the large group connection, right? Social interaction. Think the Bills game. Right? If you've ever been to a Bills game and you have Bills gear on, you're automatically connected to the other people that are wearing blue and red. Right? You're giving high fives and all of that. In fact, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've wore like Bills gear in other places, like in the Adirondacks or even in northern Michigan, I've had Bills gear on. And if somebody sees you with Bills gear on and they're a Bills fan, they automatically say, go Bills. Right? And I'm just walking, oh, hey, go Bills. Like there's an excitement there. Right? There's connected. But it's surface. It's over what I'm wearing over a sports team. It's not intentional, right? There's no investment involved there besides me buying a t-shirt. Another type of social interaction is that of an acquaintance, right? This is kind of the next level. Think your neighbors, think your coworkers, right? You know them. You might know a little bit about them, but you're not really connected with them. You don't know anything really beyond surface level conversations. Mostly invested in just because you live there, you go to school there. It's not very deep. The third level, though, is where it begins to take more investment, as well as with that investment comes the connection. Right? It's into a small group. Think 15 people or below. Most people don't have these interactions. And maybe they don't really want these interactions. Because it is an investment, it might cost something. Because there will be, you might be vulnerable. People might find out things about you. So some people don't want that. But this is the relationships that we need. We need friendships and relationships that go beyond the, hi, how are you today, and it's good. Because God said it's not good that we're alone. So what we want to do is to go beyond the surface. Because you can be in a big crowd and be alone. Because to not be known is to be alone. And that's why we have groups here at Grace. That's why we talk about them. That's how we say we want you to be involved in groups. Because we believe that life is truly better connected. We believe that this is what we saw in Jesus' life, right? Jesus had the big crowds. Jesus also had 72 that he sent out. And then Jesus had the 12 disciples. His close relationships, the guys that he celebrated wins with, the people who saw him in his darkest hour before he was betrayed. He invested his most time with 12. He even went further and had his 3 disciples that he spent more intimate time with. And this is where we'd even encourage you to go and have an accountability group. People that have an inside look into your life. We believe that as followers of Jesus, we follow what he did. And Jesus was connected. See, when we live life in smaller groups, you get to know what's going on in each other's lives. You get to share the highs of life with. But you also get to share the lows. You get to have somebody walk alongside of you in difficult times. The second why, though, is because it's how we grow spiritually. This is how we grow spiritually. If you want to grow in your relationship with God, you need one another. Yes, you grow personally, and you have a personal walk with God. But the way it's manifested is around others. It's easy to talk about being patient until your kids have you being late for something. It's easy to say that you're a peaceful person when you're alone. Ken referenced in his testimony the one another's. This is just a list of them. It's said so many times that we need to be with one another, intentionally living with one another. Why? Because God knows that our lives are to be lived with one another in community. Hebrews chapter 10 says this, "And let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day drawing near." This isn't just something at Grace that we made up, that we need to be together. It's right here from God. That what he says is there should be no excuse for a follower of Jesus to neglect community. And you might say, well, this is talking about Sunday gathering. Definitely it is talking about not neglecting getting together like that. But I think there's more to it, because if you're going to consider how to stir one another up in love and good works, if you don't know the person, how are you going to help motivate them? Right? So you have to know what is the motivation. How can I stir that person on? It isn't just a broad thing, but it means that somebody on this side has to be able to know how to stir up somebody on this side. Well, that means you got to know one another. And so I know I said a lot of you are in groups already, and that's great. But I'm sure there's many of you also that have not been able to get plugged into a group yet. So just a few suggestions for next steps. Maybe you're new around here, or maybe you started coming at the end of the spring or in the summer months when we don't really have groups going on. That might be you. I'd encourage you, your next step is to come up, sign up for a group. There'll be groups up there that you can, in the Activity Center, that you can sign up for. I encourage you to sign up for one. But don't just sign up for one, show up. Right? Take that next step and get connected. Or maybe you tried groups before. And maybe because of the busyness of life, you kind of slipped away and stopped going to group. I'd encourage you, get back involved. Start over. Or maybe you had an experience with a group that was kind of messy. That you guys didn't mesh and things just didn't go well. And so you're like, I don't want anything to do with group. I'd encourage you to rethink that and get established in a group. Find a group that you fit in and that can encourage your soul. Or maybe you love your group. Maybe you're a person here and you love getting together with your group. You just love it. You guys have a great time and you get so much out of it. Can I encourage you to even change that a little bit? I'm not saying don't love your group, but not think about how you get something out of it, but how you can get somebody else, how you can serve somebody else within that and get them involved and encourage them. Don't go to group thinking, what's in it for me, but what can I contribute to the group? See, the groups are not just for sitting and enjoying each other's company. That happens, and that's a good thing. But the groups are really about multiplying and making room for new faces. It's about, at times, being uncomfortable and serving others. Because that, too, is what we see from the life of Jesus. He was a servant, and that's why one of our other core values is save people, serve people. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to John chapter 13. And in John 13, we're going to see that serving is the way of Jesus. Serving is the way of Jesus. I wish I had more time to go through John 13. We're even going to skip a little section, the one that Nathaniel referenced about Peter saying, no, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus like, no, I'm going to wash your feet, Peter. And we're going to skip that just because we don't have time to unpack it all. But in John 13, it says this. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God. Pause for just a second. The context for what's happening here, John has been laying out for the first 12 chapters. Really, he kind of overviews the first, or Jesus' life, and then 13, he slows down and just talks about the last hours of Jesus' life. But in those first 12 chapters, we see John highlight things like in chapter 1, Jesus being present at creation, and he is God. Chapter 2, Jesus turns water into wine. Chapter 4, a Roman official comes to Jesus, telling Jesus that his son is sick to the point of death, and Jesus heals him. Chapter 5, a man who has been an invalid for 38 years is dramatically healed. Chapter 6, the 5,000 sit down and are fed with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Chapter 6, Jesus of Nazareth walks on water. Chapter 9, he heals the man who is born blind. In chapter 11, he stands outside the tomb of his good friend Lazarus and commands him to come out. And we see Jesus know exactly who he is. He knows everything about each person in the room. We'll find out that he knows that Judas is going to betray him. That Judas is squarely positioned as an enemy to take Jesus off mission, or what he thinks is taking it off mission. Although Judas was a trusted person, right? He was trusted among the group. He kept track of the money. Find out that Judas has a plan behind the scenes. And this is an important meal. Jesus is with his closest friends to partake in this meal, and the one who will betray Jesus is at the table with them. Let the weight of that sit on your thinking for a second. The one who will betray Jesus is in the room at the table. He knows that Peter, in just a few hours, is going to deny him. Deny even knowing, right? One of his closest friends is going to deny even knowing him. Jesus knows that he is preparing to die. I don't know what you do when you're under pressure. When you get called to the principal's office. I don't know what you do if you have to have a conversation with your boss. But typically, when those things are happening, we're not thinking of other people. Our mind is on me. What's going to happen to me? But Jesus, knowing he is about to be put through one of the worst and most painful executions possible, one that he doesn't even deserve, what does he do? Verse 4. He rose up from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand." We're going to skip over to verse 12. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." what happens is unbelievable. The Creator is bending to wash the feet of his creation. The one who spoke and created H2O is using that to wash his disciples' feet. Now, this is customary in this day, that to wash feet. It would be the normal thing for someone to come into the house and somebody would wash the feet of their guests. Usually it's done by the lowest servant. The one who has the least status in the group would be the one doing that. They did this because they were sitting at tables, not like we have, but they're low to the ground, and so they would recline at them. They'd be sitting on one hip with their feet out behind them. Jess and I have this friend. He used to come over to our house a lot when we lived in our previous home, and great guy, fun, just funny, just helped me with projects. But he had the worst smelling feet I've ever smelled. Like, across the room, like, take off his shoes, and it was bad. We got to the point where I was like, Nick, you can't come inside until you take your shoes off and then go wash your feet in, so not very Jesus-like of me, but go wash your feet in the tub and then we can hang out. So maybe you're like that, and maybe you're just grossed out by feet. And I encourage you, sometime look up all the bacteria and stuff that is on your shoes, right? If you've ever read one of those, it's like, oh, wow, that's really bad. I don't want to wear my shoes in the house. Well, that's their feet. They're gross. They're dirty. If it's dry, they're, got the dust on them. If it's wet and muddy, then they're wet and muddy. And they're sitting there with them right off to the side. And Jesus gets up and does the messy work. The work that no one else wanted to do. Listen, all 12 of those guys, all the men went into that room at the same time. And all of them avoided it. Nobody picked it up. They all expected someone else to do it. But Jesus gets up from the table and takes off his outer garment and starts to wash the feet of his disciples. The first why we at Grace serve is because serving is the way of Jesus. Jesus said, "Do you understand what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, because I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash the feet of one another. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you." Jesus says that the way that a person follows him is the way that he lives. They don't look to be served, but to serve. They don't look to take, but to give. Their first thought isn't, what's in it for me? Their first thought is, what can I do for someone else? They don't say, that's too messy for me. They're jumping in no matter what. And the way Jesus served, the followers of Jesus follow that example. So how did Jesus serve? Well, he served in the mess. He did the messy stuff. He did the hard work. Feet are messy. People are messy. We don't wash each other's feet in our society. So I wonder, what is the messy work for you in your life? Husbands, what is the messy job that your wife just hates doing? Young person, just thought of this. A couple weeks ago, the drain stopped working. Stuff isn't going down the drain, so I got one of those drain weasels, and I should have brought the picture. I'm sorry, but it was gross. You pull out one of like a huge thing of hair. I don't have a lot of hair, and so it's definitely from a bunch of girls that live in my house. And I gotta tell you, why I'm saying this is because I had a terrible attitude. I'm like, look what I did. Oh, look how awesome I am. I cleaned out the hair. Terrible attitude in it. So husbands, we can do the dirty work, but let's have the right attitude. Young person, what is the messy job that you know your parents don't like? See, it's easy to serve when it's clean and it's what we enjoy. But what we need to do is know how Jesus served. He served when it's messy. But who did Jesus serve? Jesus served his friends and his foes. Don't get lost in this or think that you're checking the box as a follower of Jesus because you serve your friends and your family. You might be, but Jesus didn't just serve his friends and family. That's the easy thing to do. What about those that would betray us? How do we serve those who talk behind our backs? Jesus serves the disciples who were constantly messing up and he was constantly having to correct, who would fight over who was the greatest in the room. Jesus serves Judas, who he's going to betray him, and Peter, who's going to deny knowing him. And I have a hard time being kind to someone I had a disagreement with. See, if we're going to serve like Jesus, it means we're going to serve people who believe differently than us. We're going to serve people who behave and have different lifestyles than us. It means that we're going to serve those who would align themselves as enemies against us. Jesus didn't have a list of qualifications to check off to let him serve you, or a list of, if you do this, then I'll do this. No, the only qualification that Jesus had was that you're alive, you're a human being. You have value. You're here, so I will serve you. This means that we should serve people who may never sit in church next to us, who may never trust Jesus. For us, I think this means serving people that have a different political view than us, or a different lifestyle than us, or even people who cheer for the Chiefs or the Dolphins. John Mark Comer says this: being a follower of Jesus is about following him and living as Jesus lived. If you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. The way of Jesus is a way of life. It's not a set of ideas, a list of do's and don'ts. It's a way of life. And that's the type of life that Jesus says leads to blessing. Blessing meaning happiness or joy. The second why of save people, serve people, because serving leads to blessing. It leads to happiness. Doing the hard thing, doing the messy work, serving leads to blessing. That's the way of Jesus. So, a few suggestions as next steps that I have. First, we're going to start at home, because I think we could say that, well, we can serve at church, but really it starts at home. So husbands, I already said this, find the thing that your wife doesn't like doing and do it for her. Parents, put down your phones and interact with your kids. Students, put down your phones and interact with your parents. There's ways at home. Yeah, I could say, hey, make sure you're doing the dishes, kids. Make sure you're helping along with that. Just bless your parents and interact with them. Put down your phone. Put down your devices. Have actual connected lives. How about during the week when you're not here at church and you're maybe not at home? A couple of suggestions are, what in your workplace can you look for that a need in your workplace that you can meet? Or in your community. Maybe it's a neighbor and you know there's a need there and you could meet that need. Serve. Well, it might be messy. Okay. Live like Jesus. Or at your workplace, what's the job that nobody likes to do? They're everywhere. What's the job that nobody likes to do and avoids it? Find it and do it. Students, find the person who nobody talks to. Find the person who is alone and sit with them. Have conversations with them. Students, pick up after yourself at school and at home. But be a blessing to even the teachers and aides and everybody that's there. Be a blessing to them. Look to see how you can serve them. At church, I heard this one and I think it's applicable here. Come early, park far, and sit close. Come early. You want to meet new people and get connected? Be here early. I know it's hard. I know kids and all these things that can go wrong, but plan to get here early so you can talk and have conversations. Be intentional with it. Come early, park far, and sit close. I don't know if you can think back to maybe your first time coming into a new place and how awkward it can feel, uncomfortable. When you can't find a parking spot, when you can't find a seat to sit in. If you can put yourself in that and say, I don't want to make that hard for anybody else. Many people are uncomfortable coming into church, a church building. They think the building might even collapse on them because they're here. And to come to sit up front, whew, terrifying. Heard this as well. Now, what we want to do as a church is we want to fill in from the front to the back and from the middle out. I encourage you, this is a great way to serve people. Maybe you don't want to sit up front. Man, what a great way to serve people. There's lots of seats up here, but if you're in the back and you're a new person and you come in and you can't find a seat, man, that's tough. So I encourage you, come early, park far. I think we counted 16 spots open last week, and that was with people parking on the road. Okay, you might think 16 is a lot, but just add in a few more cars and there's nowhere to park. I don't know if I want to go in now. Save that close spot for somebody else. If you can walk, do it. Come early, park far, sit close. I'm going to have the worship team come up, but I want to, we'll close in a song, and then we're going to go up into, you might be like, wow, he's done early. Not yet. But if you're in a group, here's another thing that I would challenge you in the next step. I want you to consider if you might lead a group sometime. As we grow, it's a great problem. It's not really a problem, but we want to figure it out. Like right now we have, I think it's over 30 people, or right around 30 people, that are in our Discover Grace classes. Like, that's a great thing. But as we grow, we need to have more groups for them to get plugged into. We need to have people who are willing to step out, maybe out of your comfort zone, and say, you know what, I'll host a group. I'll lead a group. Because maybe you've grown comfortable with your group, right? You see, we talked about the bigger groups. As soon as you're like 12, 15, you're over that number, people start to shrink back. So you want to be about multiplying. So I encourage you to consider if you would be willing, not right now, and we'll train you, but consider multiplying and having a group of your own. And finally, there's the spiritual gift assessment. Love for you to still take this. See where you could get plugged in. Where can you serve? This is not a test, okay? Maybe it'll say test, it's an assessment. This is not a pass-fail. So I don't want you to think and you go on and you're like, man, they're going to know that I fail in this area. No, this is where you're gifted. And then it'll also ask where you're interested in serving. And then if you don't know where to go, you can contact us or we'll contact you when there's a need to help. So I encourage you can scan that QR code. But we're going to have the opportunity at the end, in just a few minutes after this song, I'll come up and give more direction. But we're going to go up. We're ending early. You can't go get your kids yet because kids' classes are still going on. We're going to encourage you to go up to the activity center where you'll see groups that you can sign up for and ministries that you can sign up for as well. So we're going to do that. We'll spend about 5 or 10 minutes up there, and then we'll tell you when you can get your kids. But first, we're going to sing a song.
Would you all please stand with us?
Strength, my song is
So like we say, everybody has a next step. Maybe it's in serving, maybe it's getting connected. But we want to be a part of what we can do to help you in your spiritual journey. So maybe you're here and you're like, this is your first time and you don't even know if you have a relationship with Jesus. I'd love to talk to you about that. We'd love to help you in that. That's your first step. And then getting connected and serving, it's great as well. And so up in the activity center, I encourage you to go up there. There's a bunch of tables, a bunch of opportunities where you can sign up, spend some time. You can even start getting connected with one another up there as you talk and mingle. But as we say here at Grace, you are not dismissed, you are sent to the activity center.